Good morning, everyone. I apologize for my delays. I mistaken the time. Never happened to me, and I was so comfortable to start at 10 o'clock, and I'm so happy that you guys reached out to me. So sorry. So I hope you didn't have to wait too long. I believe I see you're all in the room. Are we correct? I'm trying to see all the present here.
We're all here.
Thank you. I'm going to start the meeting in a second. Perfect. Okay, then we're official. Welcome to the January 20, 2022 Policy Advocacy Committee meeting. My name is Max Disposti. I'm the board chair of this committee. My pronouns are him, is. Before we convene, I would like to remind everyone that is present that the board is a consumer protection agency charged with administering and enforcing the board's laws. Where protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. The meeting today is being conducted consistent with the provision of Government Code Section 11133. I will announce when we are accepting public comments on the various issues, and the meeting moderator will open the lines as appropriate. Each commenter will have 2 minutes to comment. Moderator, will you please provide the audience instruction on how they might participate during the meeting at the appropriate times? Thank you.
This is the moderator, and when the committee chair gets to a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, the Q&A feature will be open. And we please ask that you click the Q&A icon at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. Type comment or I would like to make a comment in the field and send to all panelists. Then when we go in order of comments received, please, I will request to unmute you, and you will need to click the Unmute Me button on your device. If you are a call-in only participant, you'll click *6 on your device to unmute yourself. If you, we're also accepting public comment from raised hands. There should be a little hand icon next to your name, and you can click that to indicate that you wish to make a comment. And then for audio only participants, you can indicate that you would like to raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device, and you'll click *3 again to lower your hand.
Thank you so much, moderator. Thank you so much. I think now it's time to call the quorum for the meeting. Christina Kitamura, if you can help us with that. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Max Disposti.
I'm here, public member.
John Sovek.
Present.
Wendy Strack.
Here, public member.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Christina. So just before we begin, just as a reminder, a general reminder that all speakers to remain on the topic when making comments on the agenda items. And we are beginning with the first agenda item. It says this discussion and possible approval of the August 6, 2021 and October 20, 2021 committee meetings minutes, which is agenda number 3. Do the board members have any suggested amendment, or should the minutes be approved?
I'll make a motion for approval.
Thank you, Wendy. Any second?
I'll second.
Not many choices there, right? Thank you, John. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. So if there are not any other discussion, Christina, can you please take the vote?
We would need to have public comment.
Oh, public comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moderator, can you please open to public comments if there are any, and see if we any public comments in regards to the agenda item. Thank you.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or click the raise hand icon. We'll go in order that comments are received, and it looks like we do have one individual who has requested public comment, Rebecca Gonzalez.
Thank you, moderator. Hi, Rebecca.
One moment. Rebecca, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. I'll request to unmute your microphone now.
Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California chapter. Simple correction on the October 20th minutes. Gonzalez, every time I mentioned it has a Z at the end instead of an S. It's correct in the first set of notes, but I don't always correct people, but I guess I should. So Gonzalez with an S at the end. Thank you.
Thank
Rebecca,
you.
we're taking comments on August 6th committee meeting minutes, but I will go ahead and note that for the October minutes on your public comment.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you.
Rebecca, thank you. Please don't be sorry. I mean, after so long, we should know better, right? So thank you so much for bringing that to the attention. And so we apologize. And thank you. Thank you so much for being here today as well. Okay, I believe, are there any other comments, moderator?
This is the moderator. I'm not seeing any further requests for comments or raised hands. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you. So we're back with a motion on the floor. I know there is a little addendum, but there is not, substantial as we heard. Thank you, Sabina, for the reminder to go to the public again. So I believe if there are any other comments or suggestions, we can put the motions to vote. Okay, Christina, we can call the vote. Thank you.
Max Disposti,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Wendy Strack,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you, Christina. Our next agenda item number 4 is the discussion and possible recommendation regarding the practices of life coaching and pastoral counseling. I know Roseanne has some insights. Roseanne, would you like to provide us with an overview?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
So regarding the practices of life coaching and pastoral counseling, there are two different practices that we get quite a few questions about here in the office. The law requires a valid and active registration to practice within any of the board's scope of practices that the board regulates. And those are each defined in our 4 Practice Act, what the exact scope of practice is. But we do get questions about the legality and scope of practice for life coaching and pastoral counseling. The board's practice acts don't specifically discuss life coaching anywhere within them. Life coaches are not regulated by any type of governmental agency, but they are prohibited from practicing within the board's scopes of practice. So a number of questions often arise about this. Some of those being, what is the difference between life coaching and the professions regulated by the board? We get that from the public quite a bit because there's sort of some appears to be some sort of blurriness on what that means. What can the board do if practice acts are violated? What constitutes evidence that a life coach is violating the board's practice acts? How would the board prove that or no? And then how do consumers know the difference between life coaches and licensed therapists? And I've included a couple of references, A and B. There are some links that contain a more in-depth discussions of the difference between life coaching and psychotherapy. I believe, and I apologize, I think after we published this, at some point attachment B became behind a paywall. So I'm not sure how many people were able to see attachment B, but attachment A is definitely still there. So moving on to pastoral counseling. Pastoral counselors are specifically exempted in statute from the board's LMFT and LPCC practice acts, very specifically, and there's some text that I've included in the memo of what that says. And then for LCSWs, there's also a similar exclusion. It's just worded a little bit differently. So the board gets a lot of questions about this. If you have somebody that's practicing as a pastor within their church, the law, that's definitely the intent of the law, but we get questions about individuals who happen to be pastors, who maybe want to open up their own practice, and how does the law interact with allowing or disallowing that. So it may be helpful to further clarify some of the conditions under which counseling by pastors is exempted from the board's practice acts. So today we're just planning on having an open discussion about these 2 practices, and I'll open it up for a discussion now.
Thank you, Roseanne. Thank you so much. We can start perhaps with our board member. If there are any questions, any comments, any observations. that you would like to move forward?
Hi, this is John.
Hi, John. Thank you.
So, as this morning, one of the clinical members in our conversation, there are huge concerns within the license practice about coaching, really encroaching deeply on the work that we do. There are lots of examples in my personal sphere of people who were licensed people, got tired of having to live by the rules, chucked it and called themselves a coach and went out into the wild west of coaching. There are particular people who are going through their master's programs and the process of licensing are saying, this is exhausting, I'm burning out, I want to do this. And they're doing the same thing of saying, I just don't want to go through all the loopholes to be a licensed person and moving into coaching. And these are just examples within our actual profession of how people are viewing coaching. The thing that's really challenging on the consumer side is there's very little differentiation for a consumer when they're looking for a coach or a therapist. They're looking for someone who's going to address their need. I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I'm depressed, I'm going through this thing. Coaching advertises exactly the same way, in fact, much more aggressively, because they'll make guarantees and promises, which we actually are not allowed to do in our type of marketing. And because of that, the consumer is seeing these guaranteed solutions to their problems, which we as licensed people cannot say. And so it really is seriously affecting how our profession is seen, what we can offer, and creates a lot of limitations in the way that we are perceived by the public. Oftentimes I hear that coaches are seen to be much more effective and able to respond in real time because, once again, they have no rules or regulations over their profession. And the thing is, you do not even have to have any type of certification to be a coach. You can simply put the word coach connected to your name and have a practice. And these are all huge concerns for our practice and for public safety. And that's just the small, concise version of my thoughts about this.
Well, thank you, John. That definitely opened the conversation. So I really appreciate your inputs. Are there any other board members that would like to share?
I think John gave a really good overview from both perspectives, both from the profession and the consumer side. I know this is something that the some of our partner stakeholder groups have brought up to be discussed for quite some time. So I'm interested to hear some feedback on their end, but I do have some concerns from a consumer protection perspective about what promises are being made and how people can differentiate from licensed providers and folks who are who otherwise do not bring education and certification to the table at all. So I do have a concern about how we manage through that.
Thank you, Wendy. And I also agree. I think I'm very, very, interested to hear the public and comments coming from our agency. So if it's okay with you all, I would like the moderator to open for any public inputs, and then we can come back to the board if there are any additional comments and suggestions.
Max, I think Steve has a thought too.
Oh, sorry, Steve, I didn't see you. Thank you, John.
No, that's okay. I should just speak up. Sorry. Yeah, just to kind of also with the pastoral counseling, kind of to add additional what we actually look at and what we're kind of seeking some answers or seeing if we need clarification to is we have for the pastoral counselors, sometimes same thing, they have the degree, but they don't want to go and get licensed necessarily. And within the statutes, if you're performing services within your clerical position, you're exempt. But one of the things that we consistently get is somebody is ordained by a church, but are not actually working for the church, are working as a sole proprietor, collecting fees from clients. And they get, basically the churches are giving them referrals for people. So the hard part for us too on the enforcement side is really how do we go about protecting the public by finding people, coaches or pastoral counselors that are providing psychotherapeutic psychotherapeutic services, it's really hard to do. One of the things that the one thing I think we might get out of this is that we definitely could put out more public service announcements. I mean, we could educate the public more about the difference between, a counselor, a coach. That I think is probably where we should start. But then also I think there needs to be clarification for the pastoral counseling. When do we consider somebody is doing counseling as their role as a pastor, or one of the clerical type of duties, or are we concerned if they're just a sole proprietor and have just being ordained? There needs to be some kind of clarification. I don't know how to go about that, but that's where we're kind of wanting to see what everyone else has to say. So.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. And also, I added to it, I think the problem it can be also in relations to, of course, our public not knowing the differences, sometimes being misled about practices also of intervention. Many times this board has addressed the issue of diversity in minorities. There is a lot of people out there that have certain ideas about how to address, minority stress, for instance, or any other related, or in particular towards our LGBT youth. And many states are targeted for therapeutical or pseudo-therapeutical approaches that they cause a lot of harm. So there is definitely a concern. I also recognize there is an element of jurisdiction, right? The BBS, this is not under our protection, is how do we extend the understanding and the support in regards to our professionals within our own jurisdictions to make sure that they are also elevated in their quality of services that they provide to our, to the clients. So yeah, thank you so much. If you're all okay, I would like to open and then we can come back to the conversation. Steve, another comment, I'm sure.
Steve, real quick. I know coaching does not have any oversight on it. Does pastoral counseling have any oversight? I know it's not under our jurisdiction, but does it land under any oversight?
I don't believe so. I think I'm assuming when that exemption was put in place, it was meant to protect priests, rabbis, whoever, in kind of offering support with somebody who's having mental health issues. I don't think it was necessarily meant to say we're exempting you and you can take all your psychotherapeutic knowledge and work with a client in that setting. I think it was more of a protection for that group of people. So I don't believe there's any regulation. And I think over the years, though, people have taken, I can't say it's a good resource, and maybe that people have the training, so it's good that people are getting the extra, accessibility to it. But I think it's kind of taken advantage of as a loophole to get into a private practice when you don't have a license, is the way I kind of see it.
Well, then that's an interesting question for me. Is coaching is kind of totally outside our world. Pastoral counseling, though, sounds like it's very close to our world, because you're describing a lot of people maybe going through their graduate programs and then moving on to the pastoral side. So is there a way to maybe work with Roseanne to look at languaging to maybe include pastoral counseling under our umbrella as a way to help their profession grow and to provide consumer protection?
I think it falls, it's the same thing as coaching in essence. They shouldn't, as a pastoral counselor, you should not, I don't believe you should necessarily be doing the stuff that's under our scope of practice. If you're tied to a church, so here's where I've had to, work with some of the complaints we've had, and it's been tough, but let's say you're ordained by a church. My assumption is that you would be exempt if you're providing services under the guise of that church, meaning that you're not collecting a fee, you're actually going out and working for the church, you're getting a paycheck or whatever, support from the church. Not that the church, ordains you and then starts giving you referrals for clients. That, I don't know. That's where we're kind of struggling, is how to tie the clinician or the pastoral counselor saying, is this your normal duties as a cleric? How do we do that?
And I guess the thing that I'm seeing as actually a potential exciting long-term possibility is if pastoral counseling somehow found its way under our jurisdiction, it would provide a huge resource in communities that may not have access to counseling. So a lot of lower socioeconomic, economically challenged communities do still have a very strong church element in their area. So if some way pastoral counseling became another aspect of counseling and therapy, tested, licensed, regulated, it could provide a huge resource into underserved communities. And this is a long-term question. It's not like it's going to happen by the end of this year, but it is a curiosity that might be worth exploring because we are looking at this long-term mental health crisis we're looking at post-COVID.
No, that's a really good point. It's definitely, I do agree. It's something to explore. I mean, yeah, another license type though. And then I think the thing is really the scope of practice. So we would be looking at the scope of practice is, I mean, what's pastoral counseling? Then we'd have to get the definition of what is pastoral counseling. Is it psychotherapeutic? Are you, doing all the same stuff our licensees are doing? Then maybe I don't know. There's a lot to talk about. That is a good point.
Right. And remember, there are subtleties within LMFTs, LCSWs, LPPCs, there are all these subtleties. And then especially because the whole thing just moved forward about the, what is it? The mentor counseling? I'm sorry, my brain is shutting down on that.
Video supervision or no?
No. The thing about untrained people being part of.
Peer counselors?
Peer counselors, with that whole thing that just moved forward. Does that all somehow connect in an interesting way?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. Again, this conversation is not over for the board. So I see there are some questions also in our chat. I would like the moderator to open and go and see if there are any comments or if we are able to read some of the comments that have been written as well. Thank you, moderator.
All right, this is the moderator. The Q&A feature is open, so if you would like to make a comment, you can indicate that you would like to make a comment that way or use the raise hand feature. I'll start with Kiana Robinson, who has their hand raised. One moment while I find them in the attendee list. All right, and Kiana, I'm going to request to unmute your microphone. You'll need to click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device. And then, Kiana, I see that you might be on like an iPad or something. I may have to try to unmute you so we can hear you. So let me try one more time.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you guys so much for discussing this topic. I've been listening to the different comments and concerns from the board, and I do share in the same sentiment that you guys have been discussing. One alternate approach or viewpoint I would hope that we can consider in this conversation is there being certain concerns, issues, topics that certain clients will reach out for that don't necessarily meet the criteria for LMFTs or social work that is regulated under the board, or for a mental health issue. For example, someone may come in wanting support similar to an accountability coach. They're having anxiety that might be diagnosed by another provider, but those symptoms may or may not be impacting them with procrastination, goals that they are trying to personal goals that they might be trying to achieve. And I think in those cases, life coaching would be kind of the realm that would fit into. I would definitely hope that we would consider life coaching as, or I would hope that we would consider that as something that is also beneficial to the public, although it doesn't fall under the BBS's regulation. It still has been shown to be very important, and the consumers do actually like the fact that there is an alternative option for concerns that they may have that don't necessarily fall within our scope of practice. I've had several clients reach out and during the consultation realize that they don't necessarily need my services. They don't necessarily need to go into psychodynamics and things like that. It's more so their concern is looking for someone to help regulate, help structure some of their thoughts, feelings, and we're not really going deep into psychodynamics and psychology. So I think that it is equally important. I would hate for the conversation to exclude anything that is actually shown beneficial to the public. And I just would hope that this conversation also discusses the importance of the life coaching role as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. Moderator, do we have anyone else?
This is the moderator. I also, I apologize. I think someone had their hand raised and I think I might have accidentally lowered it. Trying to thank you. I was trying to get the other person. We have a hand raised from Alicia Dabney. I'll request to unmute your microphone now.
Hi there. My name is Alicia Dabney. I'm an associate MFT and associate PCC and also a provisional art therapist. And I'm appreciating the discussion that's happening here today. And I share some of the concerns about consumer protection. Even as an associate in my short time in the field already, I'm going on, I guess if I count my practicum traineeship, 2.5 years working with clients. What I have seen is multiple clients with trauma histories coming to me and relating a recent experience with life coaches where they have essentially not really stayed in their lane. And they've been negatively impacted by that in some cases, some more than others. But my concern is essentially, them life coaches needing a little more regulation and guidance in terms of what as Kiana relayed is beneficial and helpful for the coaching realm, but so many are not practicing that way. And so I would be in support of any further oversight or regulation to help support and protect the public. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Just for the sake of conversation, if I may, this is Max, the chair. Just want to make sure that this doesn't. I hope it doesn't come across a conversation around a coach is a valid practice or not, or we're not here to evaluate the practices of coaching or pastoral services, because first of all, it's not our intention. Second is we're not here to put the two together, which one is valid or not. So I appreciate the comments and the concerns, because our goal, as we stated at the beginning of this meeting, is the consumer protection, and also understanding that our jurisdictions has limits, right? We can't tell people that not even under the under the scope of our of the BBS or the licensing process, what to do or not to do. Definitely, it's a concern, and we're trying to see how to address it. And I don't have the solution for that at the moment. So I appreciate the conversation, but I just want to make sure that. Because I know that we might have life coach listening, so we're not here to question your practices. It's more about understanding, how we can protect the consumer and how we can do a better job in distinguishing the scopes of our practice, and through through the work we do every day. So I just want to share that comment briefly to avoid any possible misunderstanding from our audience. So thank you. Sorry, moderator. If there are any other comments, we would love to hear it. Thank you.
This is a moderator. We do have a list of comments, so we'll go through them in order. I have Ben Caldwell has requested next. So Ben, I will request to unmute your microphone now. All right, Ben, and you are unmuted.
Ben Caldwell, I'm a licensed MFT. And three things quickly. The first is that to what Max and Steve have both said, I really like the idea of taking an educational approach here. I think all the stakeholders can be involved in that, as well as the board, making sure that practitioners understand and consumers understand the differences between coaching and licensed therapy, because they are substantive. When it comes to consumer protection for coaching, I do think it's helpful for us to remain aware that it's not entirely the Wild West. There are still some pretty strong consumer fraud protections in California law. And I think about the reparative therapy organization, and I think it was New Jersey, that was actually taken out of business because of consumer fraud statutes rather than statutes around licensing. And the third thing is a question about enforcement. And Steve, I don't know whether you would know the answer to this, but I was curious if the board has engaged in any enforcement actions against life coaches that were solely on the basis of practice and not on the basis of that coach holding themselves out either in a way that would suggest licensure or in a way that would suggest that they are a psychotherapist, but rather focused specifically on the activities that they engaged in. As the prior commenter said, the coach not staying in their lane, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual, Delenn Forrester. And Delenn, I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Delenn Forrester. Thank you. My name is Delenn Forrester, and I basically would have said similar things to what Ben just said. I would appreciate some. I'm in support of public education. I do think we do need to be paying attention to when life coaches are outside of their lane, and like commenter mentioned about dealing with clients who come in who have seen life coaches who did not address their trauma issues correctly, and then we do need to do the cleanup. So I just think it's a strong consumer protection situation, and I happen to live in an area where a church is training a lot of life coaches, and so they are large in our community and supported a lot in the realm. So some public education, I think, would be helpful for that. So thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual, Dr. Heather Laird. All right, and Dr. Heather Laird, I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Am I unmuted? I'm sorry.
We can hear you now.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Hi, I'm Dr. Heather Laird, and a licensed marriage and family therapist. I actually wrote in the chat what some of my thoughts were, but I'll just restate them here. I appreciate and I agree with a lot of what you've had to say about the dangers of people calling themselves coaches, but I'm a little bit curious about your thoughts on the sort of the systemic views of looking at what some of the etiology of why these things happen, right? So like our practicum students not making a living wage, interns also not making necessarily appropriate wages, which makes, sometimes these things happen, or these decisions to be made. And I'm wondering if maybe we should be taking an approach toward that as well, right? And not just looking at the outcome, but rather how it's coming to be. That's one of my concerns. And then the other is that I work frequently with clergy to help them become more literate around behavioral health. And I've been doing this for several years. And so, because of the stigma that exists in a lot of religious communities around mental health and well-being, this is, an area that needs a lot of work and attention. And people do remain in their very distinct roles when they understand what the roles are. So, to Dr. Caldwell's comments and Delene's comments as well, the education part is really important, but I think there's a lot of gray area there that this requires a really in-depth conversation for all the interests involved, because we do want to increase capacity in communities where there are not currently care being given, but that takes a lot of work and a lot of give and take when there's so much stigma involved. And so I think that this is a good conversation, but it needs to maybe even be a whole day of conversation because there's so much involved in it. So that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
All right, this is a moderator, and we will move on to our next individual, Jennifer Alley. Jennifer, I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Morning, this is Jennifer Alley with CAMP, the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. I want to thank the committee members and public commenters. This has been a very thoughtful discussion on life coaching, which is something we've been, wanting to see on the agenda for a little bit. And, as CAMP has seen the use of life coaches continue to grow, we're really just trying to figure out, how the licensing statutes and consumer protections interact when it comes to life coaches, especially when we do hear and see a little bit of the life coaching kind of meandering into more of our practice acts. And, we're hoping that BBS can do some sort of consumer education, on even a fact sheet kind of outlining the differences, or, a little bit more, this is what a licensed professional means and can do, maybe a white paper, how a member of the public could file a complaint if they did, have some adverse interactions with their life coach, and then just more general, how does, BBS pursue a violation of the Practice Act? What process is there for consumers to access, and how do they do that? What advice, like I said, and information, can be made out there to help, consumer make the decision of, do they want to seek therapy, or do they have a life coaching situation? I mean, just kind of more information in general under the guise of consumer protection. I don't see life coaching falling under the BBS as a new licensing type or anything, but I do think that it's important that consumers can go somewhere for information to make an informed decision on what actions they can take to improve the quality of their life. And so just again, really appreciate this being on the agenda and the very, thoughtful conversation or discussion and comments made by people in attendance today. So thank you.
Likewise, thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual's requested public comment. Rebecca Gonzalez, I'll request to unmute your microphone now.
Hello. Good morning. Rebecca Gonzalez with the National Association of Social Workers California chapter. I also want to thank you for this discussion this morning, and I agree with the other commenters who requested more public education. The only other thought I had, if we wanted to do something stronger, and this is just a thought, is would it be possible if life coaches and pastoral counselors who are being paid for their services, if they would have to disclose that they're not licensed by the state of California? But then that brings up the enforcement issue. And I know that could be a problem for the BBS as far as your capacity. But if you wanted to go one step further, that's where I think we would go. I guess as far as pastoral counselors who are, working in their church and, I think when people get that kind of counseling, they know that they do want that type of faith-based counseling. And I don't think that would ever be consistent for the type of counseling that would be under the purview of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
All right, this is the moderator, and our next individual who has requested public comment is Brian Kay. Brian, I will be requesting to unmute your microphone now.
Morning. I actually said in my comments that this wasn't a question for this topic. I was just wondering if on the agenda at some point we were going to be discussing rules for supervision via video conferencing. My apologies for the change in topic. I was just asking internally if that was also going to be discussed at some point.
This is Sabina, legal counsel.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Steve. This is Sabina, legal counsel for the board. We will be discussing everything that is on the agenda today. And should you want to make a comment for an item not on the agenda today, that will be down there towards the end of the meeting. I believe agenda item number 8.
Okay, great. Thank you.
This is the moderator, and our next individual who has requested public comment, identified as Anna. Anna, I see that you might be connected from like an iPad or something. I'll have to unmute you, and then you'll need to mute yourself, and I have to unmute you again because iPads are weird with WebEx. So I'll request to unmute now.
Hello?
Okay, we can hear you. Thank you. Oh, let me request to unmute again.
Okay.
You should be unmuted now.
Okay, great. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate that the board is taking on this issue. I think it's really important. And I'm also really appreciating all the thoughtful responses, both from the board and from the commenters. I want to say that I believe that the purpose of the board is to protect consumers who are receiving treatment. And to my mind, that would include pastoral counseling and coaching. So I know capacity is an issue, but if not under the umbrella of the board, I think that it is actually really dangerous for people who are unlicensed and just putting out a shingle to providing services for people in the guise of counseling. Very dangerous psychologically. And I think Ben Caldwell had a good point about consumer protection. But one of the things that can happen in that kind of relationship is people can get very confused. There can be a lot of transference issues. People can take advantage of other people. It's really, to my mind, a very dangerous situation where the consumer may not know that they have actually been taken advantage of or abused. So I really would hope that the board could find some way to bring this under their wing. For one thing, people hanging on a shingle and calling themselves therapists who are not therapists, to be, that should not be allowed, to my mind. Education is useful, but it only goes so far. So I hope that the board, I'm really glad the board is talking about this. And I really hope that there can be a solution found to bring these professions under some type of oversight. I don't believe they should be practicing without oversight and without responsibility and regulation. Okay, thank you so much for allowing me to comment and for giving me this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
All right, this is the moderator, and that appears to be all the individuals who have requested public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, at the moment. Yes, thank you so much, moderator. So, back to my fellow board members. Are there any? I see John raising his hands. Go ahead, John.
So there's been so much great feedback from the public that Nick came up with a couple of thoughts from me. And this might be something that the BBS could actually start moving with in a way that's non-policy oriented, but trying to figure out what next steps could be. Would it make sense to be working with our stakeholder organizations like CAMP and them to create a survey for their members to gather more information about what is actually happening out there in the field for real? You know, I'm sharing things that I've been seeing, conversations in, particular therapeutic groups talking about like their coaches who are taking trauma-based trainings and bringing that into their coaching practices. So there is kind of a Wild West mentality that is starting to develop in the coaching world. But bringing it right back into the people that are most being affected by it, as far as, that are represented by the BBS, working with these stakeholder organizations to create a really, in-depth survey to find out how is this showing up in the day-to-day practices of the people that are out there, the licensees and registrants that are doing this work. The other thing too, I heard an interesting thing about, creating ways for people to complain about coaches and pieces like that. And I think if we're going to approach a public education model, we need to definitely explore the idea of how do people receive their information now. And rather than making it maybe an esoteric approach, really looking at how do we get this message to people, like ask to see a license, here are 5 questions to ask a therapist or someone you're going to for counseling. Things like that are much more proactive rather than if something goes wrong, here's what you could do. And that's just from my, experience of how people receive information today. So those are just a couple of thoughts I had.
Thank you, John. Like you, I enjoyed the conversation. I know this is just the beginning, so it's not our attempt to, summarize any of the very valid comments and concerns that our public has shared. I'm a little bit. I do feel in a way that there is the Wild Wild West out there. So I know that Ben has a lot of experience and spoke today to us and also brought up some good example in regards to how certain dynamics have been made accountable, not just because through the BBS, but through other means. I can speak only for what I know in regards to also the experience of serving an LGBT service center that provides behavioral services. In California, the number one issues with our homeless youth is reparative therapy. It is coming over 90% from unregulated, non-licensed pastoral services and coaches. Those damages now we know by the data that we have are irreparable, are life-threatening in many cases. So, of course, this is just one example I can speak to, and so that creates a lot of anxiety. But at the same time, I understand that there is an element of jurisdictions. I mean, if these services are not under our jurisdictions, which we can't just ask them to do things that we don't have the authority for. And also, we can't force them to go through the process of licensing because they have no interest and because it's not what we are supposed to do. So it's really a very delicate balance. But I do like what, I don't know if it was Rebecca, I believe, yes, she was mentioning around perhaps, working with other consumer protections in California, perhaps the possibility that you had to say that you're not a license under the state of California. That could be one way. I don't know how much our public, though, especially in areas, in remote areas where there's so much need for mental health. So I also, I'm receptive to the comment, I forgot the name, so I apologize, in regards to the dynamics or lack of access or care that has created a void where people are stepping in with their own personal skills and the willingness to help people, or the cost of education that has alienated people from the process. Those are very valid points. At the same time, they also were addressed in many other different spaces, but so there is a real problem of accessibility that might have created these issues, but obviously, we can speculate as much as we can. The reality here is that we need to make sure that we protect the consumer that are coming to us, to our licensees, for full recommendations and protections, also privacy. We could have a conversation all day in regards to possible HIPAA violations. That sometimes even our own licensee fall into it for lack of education. So sometimes we have a problem communicating with our own licensee. I can't imagine surveying the rest of the population to try to understand where the problem lies here. So I like the idea, John, as well, yours. I don't know how, if it's going to give us back that service, a full picture of what we need to see, or maybe it's biased by the lenses of our own institutions. So that too, it's a problem. I know it could be possible. And I don't want to steal the thunder, some of the recommendations, also the staff, it could be the possibility for us to, as a BBS, to hire some experts, expertise, some expert with expertise in particular about coaching and licensing, explaining the differences. So what we know so far before, what's out there, so we can start understanding ourselves, what we're looking at, and what are the dynamics out there in regards to coaching. So perhaps it could be a step that we might take as a BBS to actually really a practitioner that has expertise on the issues of coaching and licensing as well could be a way to go, just to start putting some things down in regards to the challenges that we might face. That could be one way. So I don't want to close the conversation because obviously we're still talking about this. So I invite the rest of the board to chime in if there are any other comments. So I thank you. Thanks for the time as well.
This is the moderator, Sia Handries from Roseanne Helms.
Yeah, I thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, Rebecca hit on a really interesting point in that the required disclosure, and we have something that's kind of like that in law already, although it doesn't really, it loosely applies to pastoral counseling, but we did put into law a couple of years ago a requirement that if somebody in a non-exempt setting is going to be practicing psychotherapy, basically, that they are required to disclose to clients, give that piece of paper in 12-point font to their clients, saying where to file a complaint with the agency. And so that is something that's out there, but it's an issue of enforcement. We're not necessarily aware, all the non-exempt settings out there that are not under our jurisdiction. It's almost kind of an honor thing. There's not a lot we can do. It's sort of a best practice that we would like people to follow, and we put that in there in hopes that they would follow it. It would be rare for us to find out that somebody wasn't following it unless something really bad happened. So that is one sort of step we've taken. I don't know if there's any ideas about where else that could go. Another thing, a little bit about the life coaching. If we wanted to put together a life coaching versus psychotherapy, I'm wondering if anybody knows of any subject matter experts out there that really have a good handle on, maybe they have practiced both at one time, or they have a good handle on explaining the differences really clearly. If we could work with that sort of person to maybe put together like a one-page FAQ or a comparison as an outreach material, I think that like having an expert to help consult and like putting that together would be helpful. That's all.
Steve, I potentially would have a resource that I could refer you to at least explore what Roseanne just suggested.
Okay.
And I actually just want to bring into idea too is, what Max was saying about looking at the public's response and understanding of coaching and therapy. That maybe this is potentially a two-prong approach. Once again, I think we're still in information gathering phase. So working with our stakeholder groups to gather the clinical side of what we're seeing with coaching and therapy, and at the same time, either through the BBS or hiring an outside agency to do a public awareness campaign to find out, well, what's the public view? And then we can bring those two pieces together, and that might inform us as to what might be some policy steps to take going forward. And then one other thing, well, two things. First of all, good morning, Marlon. I realize you've been here the whole time. It's just like, yay, Marlon's here. But I also wanted to bring in this idea that I would like us as a board to be really, really wary of using the therapy versus coaching language, which is showing up a lot both in us and the public comments. I don't believe it has to be therapy versus coaching. Even though as the clinical person, I had very strong views about what's going on between them. I think what would be real more powerful for us is how do we bring therapy and coaching like in a realm where they could actually work together, but people are informed about how they work and what they do. I think the versus thing is a real dangerous language for us to start considering.
Very good point. Thank you, John. And then Steve.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, John. I think definitely when we go about this, I think the best thing we can do right now is do the public education and making it so it's not, therapy versus coaching. I do agree with that. And I think that's kind of like part of our strategic plan is kind of explaining one of the parts in there is kind of explaining a little bit better about what therapists do, what our different license types do. And this could also include, what is the difference between that and a coach? And then I think with the education, I think we could definitely, with the board, we can internally get some sort of expert to start looking at, what we could do for a publication and making the differential descriptions on that, and then maybe reach out to the stakeholders, get their opinions on the paper, and look for, consensus on what we can do for a good education, education. Education. So the one thing too is I'm looking at maybe a two-prong approach too. Not only with the consumer, we do have a consumer publication that basically explains, your kind of rights as a consumer. I think we need to do a better job of that and kind of put this as a good opportunity for maybe to relook at that. But I think what I would like to see possibly when we go through this, the education will take not only the consumer, explaining to the consumer what their rights are, what's the difference between, the therapist and a coaching person, but maybe also speaking to the licensees themselves also, or to coaches also, maybe coming with a publication to explain, what we view as therapy, what we view as coaching. So maybe a whole two-prong approach, not only consumer, but for the actual coaches and such.
Thank you, Steve. And anyone else? And yes, welcome, Marcus McManus. I'm sorry I couldn't see you before, so welcome for joining us, our board member. Any other comments? I'm trying to see if I can see all of you. Make sure I don't miss anyone. Perhaps I don't try to summarize. I'm sure we will like to send some directions to our staff, right? Through a motion, Roseanne, am I correct? So perhaps we can direct staff to draft a language that will seek to clarify the practices of coaching and pastoral counseling, and then bring it back to us at the P&A committee, or something more specific.
I don't know that we want to try to draft internally a document, but I think maybe that we take some steps to sort of find somebody that can collaborate with us.
Okay. So like you suggested before, pretty much seeking the opportunity to hire an expert.
Yeah.
Maybe working on creating a public service or public education regarding. I think that might be a broader term, because then we can go from there. The board request that the staff begin drafting public or educational documents concerning coaching and pastoral counseling.
Yeah, but for what I understand, I agree. But perhaps to make it a little bit more clear, I like what Roseanne suggested since the beginning, the fact that it should go under the possibility, so that we know exactly how this is going to happen.
Okay.
So maybe if there is a possibility that we could hire one of our subject matters experts to help us with this process.
Maybe the next step is, I'm just throwing this out there, maybe because I feel like we're not actually we need somebody that really has the in-depth knowledge of writing a fact sheet on, how to explain it to the public. I don't know that we really have that on staff. I think we would want somebody that's more an expert in the field. So maybe we, Steve and I, collaborate with stakeholders to determine, to identify, an expert and work through the collaborative process of drafting an FAQ or something like that.
Okay.
Maybe. I mean, I'd be interested to hear from Campton and NASW how they would feel about that.
Sure, we can do that, and maybe we can ask our moderator to reopen to the public to see if we can have some inputs as well. Thank you, moderator.
This is the moderator. I've opened up the Q&A feature once more. If you would like to make a comment, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand feature. Right, I see a comment from Rebecca Gonzalez. So Rebecca, I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Good afternoon, Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California chapter. Roseanne, I think I need clarification. When you say work with the stakeholders to come up with this, are you talking about the regular stakeholders such as Campton, NASW, or are you talking about finding someone in the life coaching world? I don't know if they have an association, or I don't know, with pastoral counseling, I would think maybe you would go to a university where they train, people kind of provide that training in a religious institution. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I kind of mean working with Campton and NASW to sort of identify individuals who would be sort of good candidates to have this level of expertise that could write something and then maybe collaborate on the document, as it's drafted, to get something that all parties are happy with. I mean, it's a little bit, when you're collaborating with just one person, it kind of, differing people can have differing opinions. So I'm kind of wondering how to navigate that. So I'm kind of thinking of it as more like a sort of a group effort to kind of agree on somebody that is qualified, and then kind of guiding them through that process to kind of get a product that everybody's happy with.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure NASW, we would be happy to collaborate on any on this project.
Thank you, Rebecca. Moderator, any other comments in regards to this?
This is the moderator. I have a request from Jennifer Alley, and Jennifer, I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Hello, this is Jennifer Alley with Campton. We would be more than happy to collaborate with BBS in a process to either draft materials and/or find an expert or experts in this area. Thank you very much for the opportunity for us to participate.
Thank you. I believe that will be it. Am I right, moderator?
Yes, this is the moderator. There are no further requests. Would you like me to close that Q&A?
Yes, thank you. So back to our board, perhaps we should translate that into a motion so that we can move a motion a second. Steve, do you have any suggestion?
gonna try. Let's see. I'm gonna stumble through this, but I'm thinking because I being specific on looking for an expert. I'm not sure if that's exactly what, but I'm thinking direct staff to pursue a educational campaign regarding coaching and pastoral counseling, and seek resources to assist in that. I mean, maybe just saying direct board staff to pursue an educational campaign on pastoral counseling or and life coaching.
I'm a little bit concerned about the campaign word in there because it sounds almost like they were to go out and educate the public about when it's actually, I mean, for lack of a better word, more internal research. So maybe I would take the campaign out because it seems like we're ready to go out and educate the public in regards to that, which is not what we're doing, right?
Well, we would be outreach. There, how about outreach?
Materials, maybe.
Outreach, because obviously we're working with our agency and I feel like we are getting ready to know more so that we can actually put something out there once it comes back to the PNA and so forth. I was concerned that language might sound like we are just going out educating and
So can I take a crack at it? So maybe it's about coordinating with stakeholder organizations to gather expertise and draft potential outreach information.
I like that.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a stage prior to already going to the
We're not ready to put a campaign out. We barely even have the most basic of information on this yet. So I think we don't want to get ahead of ourselves on this.
So I'm sure Sabina wants to know a little bit more of the details of this motion because just to make sure we pin it down properly so we can vote something that is specific. Roseanne, did you write it down or?
Yeah, what I have is direct staff to coordinate with stakeholders to gather expertise and draft potential outreach materials on pastoral counseling and life coaching.
Great. I like it.
Sabina likes it, so we're good to go. Okay, who wants to move the motion?
I'd like to move the motion since I suggested it.
And I can second the motion, unless I didn't see any other hands, so I apologize if I step into anyone. Okay, I can second the motion. And I believe at this point, Sabina, we have to still go back to the public. Am I right?
That is correct. We'll take public comment here, and then we'll come back for our vote.
Thank you. You see, I'm learning. Moderator, if you could please open to the public. Thank you.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this motion, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. I'll pause a moment to let any individuals access the Q&A feature. Right, and it looks like we do have a request from Jennifer Alley. Jennifer, I will request to unmute your microphone now.
CAMP supports this motion and appreciates the board's willingness to address this issue.
Thank you, Jennifer.
All right, this is the moderator. It appears there are no further requests for comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second by me on the floor, and I believe this is the time for us, unless there are any other additional comments. No? This is the time for us to vote. Christina, please. Thank you.
Max Disposti?
Yes.
John Sobek?
Yes.
Wendy Strack?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And okay, thank you so much. I believe that's concluded. So I have a request from our legal counsel, Sabina. Apparently, when we voted our minutes at the beginning of this meeting, we didn't clarify for the minutes to include the minutes on the motion of October 6, 2021. Am I correct, Sabina? So you would like us to retake the vote?
Yes, so that there was a correction, but the correction was for the minutes, the October minutes.
Right.
The motion, Wendy's motion, I think only stated the August 6th date. So
Okay.
we just need to make sure that we also have a motion with the October 20th date, just so we can make sure everything is fully approved.
And the motion for the October 20th minutes would be to approve them as amended. There was a correction noted.
Okay, so since we're here, we can do that. So how would you like the motion to actually reflect that, Sabina, just to make sure that we don't miss it again?
Just what Christina said, the motion will be to approve the October 20th, 2021 committee meeting minutes with amendments as stated, here, or as stated.
As amended.
Okay. Wendy, would you like to carry that motion again?
Sure. I'll motion to approve the October 20th, 2021 committee meeting minutes as amended.
Wonderful. Any second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And I believe we are going to the public because we have a new motion. So moderator, if you could please open. Thank you.
This is the moderator. At the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon or use the raise hand function. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you, moderator. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. I think we are ready to vote. Christina?
Max Disposti?
Yes.
John Sovek?
Yes.
Wendy Strapp?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you so much. And thank you again, Sabina, for catching that. Make sure that we didn't have to carry that in our next meeting. Okay, I think we are ready to move to our agenda item number 5. Next, in this agenda item, we have a presentation request to add a coursework in parent alienation to the educational requirements for the licensures. And this is presented. We have, I believe we have guests with us today. They are going to do the presentation. I hope I pronounce it correctly. There is Ron Berglass, Dr. William Bernet, and Dr. Lynn Steinberg, that they are here today to make this presentation on these particular issues. As a reminder to the board member, this is a presentation, so we will not be making any motions, but we're really, really honored to have the team here to present and to start the conversation. The floor is yours. I'm sure the moderator will have to give you or maybe the moderator knows what to do, so I'm not going to tell them what to do.
This is the moderator, Dr. Burnett. I have passed over presentation rights to you. At the bottom of your WebEx screen, there should be a button that says share, and you can share your PowerPoint that way.
Thank you.
Moderator?
Thank you for that.
This is Ron Berglass. I believe I'm supposed to go first.
Oh, I apologize. Do you need me to pass over the presenter role to you?
No, that's all right. Can I begin?
Yes.
Ron, turn your video on.
Okay, there I am.
Now we see you. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ron Berglass, and I will just get this working. Give me a second, please. Okay, my name is Ron Berglass, and I, along with my colleagues, Dr. William Burnett and Dr. Lynn Steinberg, represent the Parental Alienation Legislative Group. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present to you today. We are here to ask you to support our proposal to amend the Business and Professions Code to make it a requirement for all mental health practitioners working with children to be educated in parental alienation and its diagnostic indicators. What is parental alienation? I'm sure you've heard of it, maybe in your own lives or maybe in the lives of those whom you know and love, but didn't know it had a name. According to my colleague, Dr. William Burnett, Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry at Vanderbilt University and the author of the highly acclaimed Parental Alienation Science and Law, it is a psychological dynamic in which a child, usually one whose parents are engaged in a high conflict divorce, allies strongly with one parent, the preferred parent, and rejects a relationship with the other parent, the alienated parent, without a good reason. The long-term mental, emotional, and physical damage done to a child by parental alienation has been proved to cause substance abuse, cutting, diabetes, chronic difficulties with relationships, educational and career challenges, lack of self-esteem, and sometimes suicide. The alienators are the architects of their own exoneration. By coercing their child to reject their other parent, the alienator tells the police, lawyers, therapists, and the court that it is not their responsibility that their child has rejected their other parent. They claim the child decided to hate their parent, not them. That is severe psychological abuse. Dr. Steinberg and I are both alienated parents, but we are not here to lament our losses on your doorstep. We are here representing thousands of California children to help them avoid this awful trauma. And the best first step is to require all members of the California therapeutic community working with children to be educated in parental alienation. The current approaches of family therapy do not address the dynamics at play. Causing parental alienation through alienating behaviors is child abuse. It is family violence. It is domestic violence. It is child coercive control. On September 29, 2020, the legislature passed SB 1141, Rubio, Chapter 248, an act to amend Section 6320 of the Family Code relating to coercive control. Here is an excerpt from that law. By adding coercive control, the bill, for purposes of a family court determining child custody in those proceedings, creates a rebuttable presumption that an award of a child custody to a party who is engaged in coercive control is detrimental to the best interest of the child. The bill goes on to state, as used in this subdivision, A, disturbing the peace of the other party refers to conduct that destroys the mental or emotional calm of the other party. This conduct includes coercive control, which is a pattern of behavior that interferes with a person's free will and personal liberty. An example of coercive control includes unreasonably engaging in isolating the other party from friends, relatives, or other sources of support. Divorcing families in California are required to go to mediation and frequently are ordered into co-parenting therapy. Parental alienation is not a problem that is caused by warring parents. It is caused by the malign intentions of one vengeful parent engaged in a high conflict divorce who attempts to use their children as weapons against their former spouse, whom they perceive as having done them harm. Therefore, it cannot be cured by co-parenting therapy. I should add that parental alienation is non-gender specific. Fathers as well as mothers engage in child coercive control. You will hear opposition to what we are proposing from those who disavow the existence of parental alienation. They will claim that it is a strategy used by abusive fathers to regain control of their children. Yes, that does happen. You will hear that mothers who accuse their former husbands of domestic violence have their cases thrown out, leaving the children in the hands of their abusers. Yes, that happens too. Child abuse comes in many forms. Parental alienation is one of them. Who is a child when they've been forced to reject their own parent? The parent hasn't been taken away from them, or run away, or died. The child has been psychologically coerced into rejecting their parent and eventually comes to believe it was their decision alone. A child is forced to give up a part of who they are in order to appease and mollify an abusive parent. This is the essence of family violence. Even sexually abused or violently abused children, including foster children, want to maintain some kind of relationship with their abuser and the extended family. Being alienated is the only, I repeat, the only situation in which a child completely rejects a parent and that parent's extended family. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and other important people who were part of the child's life are rejected too. The alienated child ceases to be who they were meant to be. I've already spoken of the long-term damage that causes. There are scientifically proven procedures readily available now to all mental health practitioners working with children that they could be using to recognize the diagnostic indicators, such as the 5-factor model created by the aforementioned Dr. Burnett and Dr. Amy Baker, which is a method for diagnosing parental alienation by understanding and identifying the components of this mental condition. Dr. Steinberg will go into further detail about this later in our presentation. Dr. Barry Bricklin created the Bricklin Perceptual Scales, which were developed specifically for use in child custody evaluations and which define and quantify children's attachment to and perceptions of their parents. Estranged children are likely on the Bricklin scales to manifest ambivalence toward both parents. Alienated children, on the other hand, are likely to see the preferred parent as totally good and the rejected parent as totally bad. That, in the vernacular, is called splitting. Imagine, if you will, an alienated child being transported to therapy by the alienating parent who instructs them in what to say. The therapist, perhaps well-schooled in some form of family systems therapy, but not parental alienation, concludes there must be something to the child's rejection of their parent, and so exacerbates the crime against the child by recommending to the court that the child remain with the alienating parent. The judge orders a custody evaluation. The custody evaluator, equally unschooled and uninformed in the parental alienation dynamic, contrasts the calm, collected, manipulative alienator against the targeted parent who is yet to understand why their children have turned against them. They present as confused, full of rage, and terribly hurt. After listening to the child's manufactured and rehearsed complaints about their rejected parent, quite often in language inappropriate for a child, the evaluator also concludes there must be something to what the child says and recommends to the court that the child should remain with the alienating parent. The judge, by virtue of their wide discretion, coupled with their ignorance of parental alienation, concurs, thereby sealing the child into a lifetime of self-denial and dysfunction. Think of the secret the alienated child carries so deeply that they cannot admit it to themselves, that they still love their rejected parent, but cannot give voice to that feeling, cannot allow themselves to believe it. They become adults, now believing that it was entirely their decision to reject their alienated parent and cannot be convinced otherwise. Imagine what might have happened had the therapist been trained to recognize the alienator for who they were, had been able to diagnose and treat the child appropriately, had been able to recommend to the court, based on scientific evidence, that there should be a 90-day change in custody to the targeted parent who has heretofore committed no crimes. My daughter Amy was so traumatized by not being permitted to love her father by her mother while her mother had primary custody that when she told her mother she wanted to kill herself, her mother told her to do it at her father's house, because at least then I could be seen as the bad guy. My daughter Amy, who at the age of 12, secretly asked me to go to court so that I could get custody of her, but then had to watch as her mother called her own brother to testify against her. My daughter Amy was so terribly damaged by her mother's sometimes vicious, violent coercive control that in spite of coming to live with me, overdosed twice on fentanyl. She is alive, thank God, after over a year in rehab, but still suffers from severe mental and emotional issues made worse by her mother's total abandonment of her since she lost control over her daughter. She has made no attempts to contact Amy, no apologies, nothing. It is always about control and revenge for the alienator, never about love. This is real-life family violence. Ideally, lawyers and judges should be required to be educated in parental alienation too. Ideally, there should be the threat of sanctions against continued alienation. When it has been proven that parental alienation has taken place and the 90-day reverse custody order has been enforced so that reunification can, and in the capable hands of my colleague here today, Dr. Steinberg, frequently does take place, then, if the alienating parent carries on abusing their child after those 90 days, there should be the threat of civil or criminal sanctions to dissuade them. The child deserves to love both parents freely and without guilt. In 2016, I appeared in front of the board in the public forum and talked about the importance of educating therapists in parental alienation. In 2017, Dr. Steinberg and I appeared in front of the board on the agenda and made the same request. At the time, the board requested of themselves that research be done into what we asked. To the best of my knowledge, that research was never carried out. Prior appearing here today, I emailed you a package of research in the form of scientific peer-reviewed literature that not only goes to the heart of what we're asking for today, but also combats all the misinformation and disinformation you will hear in opposition. None of what those who disavow parental alienation tell you has been peer-reviewed and therefore cannot be replicated, the underpinnings of scientific research. Whereas we have hundreds of peer-reviewed articles, scientific papers, as well as bibliographies that prove categorically that parental alienation exists and that it is family violence. These papers are an eloquent, exhaustive, and authoritative testimony to the long-term physical and emotional damage parental alienation does to children. Today, Dr. Steinberg, Dr. Burnett, and I represent thousands of children across California, the United States, and the world who, through no fault of their own, have been unceremoniously torn from their parents' lives, sometimes for years, sometimes forever, knowing that their rejected parent might be living around the corner or on the other side of the world. It makes no difference. They're gone. And one day, they might understand that they were coerced into being complicit in the rejection of their own parent who always loved them. Ladies and gentlemen, nobody should have to live with that kind of guilt. It is time to put a stop to this insidious, malignant scourge. We, the members of the Parental Alienation Legislative Group, respectfully request that you finally support our effort to amend the Business and Professions Code without further delay by making it a requirement that all mental health practitioners working with children be educated in parental alienation. Now I would like to introduce my colleague, Dr. William Burnett. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm getting progress here.
Yes, we can see you, doctor. Thank you.
Thank you. And can you see the PowerPoint?
Correct, yes.
So you can see the PowerPoint that says, research regarding alienated children and parental alienation theory. You have that? Okay, great.
Yes,
thank you.
Correct.
And thank you, Mr. Berglas, for your introduction. And thanks to the committee for your hospitality today. So I'm Dr. William Burnett. I'm a child psychiatrist and a forensic psychiatrist. And I was on the faculty at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine for 20 years. And now I'm a retired and I'm a professor emeritus at Vanderbilt. So as you can see, I'm going to talk about some research. And in particular, I'm going to talk about two things in my brief 10 minutes. First, I want to give you a clinical picture. I'm going to give you a little vignette of what parental alienation is like in children. And secondly, I'm going to briefly describe some pertinent empirical research on this topic. So first, a quick definition. Mr. Berglas already gave this to you, so I'm not going to read it again, but I will show you this little picture that what we call parental alienation is this little yellow squiggle, and that's a mental state in the child, a mental condition in which the child inappropriately rejects one of the parents. And this big red arrow is what we call alienating behaviors. In other words, the alienating behaviors by the alienating parent cause the child to develop parental alienation. So let me give you a little vignette. I'm not going to give you a narrative vignette, but I'm going to show you a few pictures. I've been collecting artwork created by alienated children, and I'm going to show you some pictures that were actually drawn by these children. I think this is a much more vivid way to display to you the really serious mental condition that these children experience. I think these drawings are very convincing, and you can see what you think. I need to warn you that some of these are very sad and they might be upsetting to some people. But here's a picture drawn by a 9-year-old girl who was severely alienated, and it's obviously a very unusual and very abnormal self-portrait. For the child, it's very painful to be caught in the battle between her parents and to be forced to reject a parent who is loving and who is loved by the child. And this is a very distressing picture. You know, the child says, "I hate my life. This is me." It's a very disfigured image of the child. But if for any of you who have ever worked with children, you would know that this is a very abnormal picture for a child to draw. So here's another example. This is a different girl. This was also a 9-year-old girl, but a different girl. And here's a note she wrote her dad, which is normal. Let's read it. Dear Dad, there is only one person in the world to be my daddy, and that is you. And you can see where she puts drum roll, you, and then love you, and so on. So that's a normal, nice little note that the girl wrote to her father. But a couple of years later, a short time later, this girl became severely alienated from her dad. And I'm going to show you the next slide, a picture that she sent to her dad when she's alienated. And I'll warn you, this is distressing. This is the picture. She says, unsincerely, me, and she's holding a sword that has blood on it. And then here's her dad who's been decapitated. It says head unattached. I think it's pretty obvious that this is a horrible picture, that this little girl is actively entertaining violent fantasies of her father's death. Here's one more of a little girl who's a different little girl at 7, and she wrote this kind of a Valentine card to her dad, to daddy from so-and-so, I love you, and so on. Well, this little girl, a couple of years later, became alienated from her father and wrote a little story. I'm going to show you the story, and we're going to read it together. And this is also, this is disturbing. These stories are very difficult because they're heartbreaking that children are having these experiences. But here's the story. This story is called He and She and the Kids. She had the kids, she gave the kids to him. The kids didn't want to go. He gave the kids back. She had the kids, she gave the kids to he. The next day he took the kids, he got shot by a tank. The kids lived happily ever after with she. So then this little story, this little girl is describing the violent death of her father. And she drew a picture, I'm going to show you the picture now, to go with this story. Here's a picture of a tank, a military tank with a cannonball coming out and presumably killing the father. And then there's some other military equipment. So it's clear, why am I showing you these things? I mean, I'm trying to make it obvious that these children have a mental condition, an abnormal mental condition that causes them to have these thoughts and feelings. And that's what we're trying to address. We would like to prevent this. And when it does occur, we would like to have it treated adequately. So let me give you real quick a few examples of peer-reviewed literature. You know, there are hundreds of articles and book chapters in books, but I'm only going to tell you about 3 or 4 of them, which I think might be the most relevant at this moment. So first of all, each of these articles answers a question. The first question is there a systematic way to diagnose parental alienation? And our answer to this is yes. This is an article that my colleague and I recently published in a really significant journal, the Journal of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. And it's about something that Ron Berglas mentioned, which is the 5-factor model for the diagnosis of parental alienation. And I'm going to show you the 5 factors. Let's run through them quickly. Number 1, the child avoids or refuses a relationship with a parent. Secondly, the child and the parent previously had a good relationship. Thirdly, there's an absence of abuse or neglect or deficient parenting that would explain, in other words, if these things had happened, that would explain the child's contact refusal. So you have to find that these things had not occurred. Fourth, multiple alienating behaviors by the favored parent. And 5th, exhibition of behavioral signs of alienation by the child. So you can see that these 5 factors touch on all 3 parties. You know, some of these pertain to the child, some of them pertain to the alienating parent, and some of them pertain to the alienated parents. But my colleagues and I think that this is a good way, it's a systematic way to diagnose parental alienation. Incidentally, under number 5, the behavioral signs, one of them, the most prominent and interesting one, is what we call lack of ambivalence, or another way to say that is splitting. In other words, it's the thing where the child says one parent is totally good and the other parent is totally bad. So that psychologists recognize that as splitting. So my next thing is there a test for parental alienation? And sure enough, there's a test for splitting. that I want to tell you about. This is a paper that my colleagues and I published a couple of years ago. And we were able to show that there's a difference between children who are severely parental alienated and children who are not. And we use a test that's common in psychology called the Parental Acceptance Rejection Questionnaire, which is also called the PARQ, the P-A-R-Q. And I'm not going to tell you the whole research, but I'm just going to show you the results. Take a look at this. This is a very dramatic display of how the alienated children, the severely alienated children on this test, separated from the non-alienated children. And you can see on the right-hand side, the alienated children had very, very high scores on this test called the PARQ gap, and the non-alienated children had low scores. And actually, you can see that one of the alienated children actually had a low score. But generally, it separated. This test separated these two categories. And it was 99% accurate. The PARQ gap was 99% accurate in distinguishing severely alienated children from non-alienated children. Is there any other test in psychology that's that accurate? I don't think so. Here's another question.
Dr. Burnett, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is the board chair, Max Disposi. Just to let you know, we allocated 15 minutes. I know you passed that time. I can give you another minute or two to summarize the conclusion. So I don't know how far you are from there.
That's okay. I can do that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
This answers the question, are there interventions for severe parental alienation? Yes, there are. Articles by Richard Warshak. The final question is it okay to testify in court regarding parental alienation? And this research shows that it's been testified more than 1,000 times in the United States, and in California, 90 times. So it's accepted in court. And finally, here are my conclusions. I appreciate your patience that parental alienation is real. Parental alienation research is widely published. Parental alienation theory is generally accepted in courts. This condition damages hundreds of thousands of children. It's treatable. And finally, for your purposes, this topic should be taught to mental health practitioners. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you for understanding about the time limitation as well. I thank you for coming here and making time for this presentation. I just would like to see if any of my fellow board members have any questions in regards. Sorry if I don't see you. Feel free to jump in. Okay. There are no questions at the moment. Okay, so if there are no comments or questions, I know that also we have your contact information so that board members can reach out to you directly. Is that correct? I'm asking to our staff as well. Thank you,
yes,
Steve.
We do. Yeah, we do.
Thank you. It's always good to see you. Thank you for the presentation again. And I know this is not an agenda item where we're going to take a vote. It was just also to share the concerns and open the conversation if there are any questions again. Otherwise, we move on to our next item in the agenda. Okay. Thank you again for being here. Thank you so much for your availability.
Excuse me,
Max,
I was going to present as well as part of the team if you have the time to do that.
Dr. Lin, I apologize. I didn't know the structure of who was presenting for how long. I know we allocated 15 minutes. How much time do you need?
Have we used that? I need about 7 minutes.
I'm sorry, Dr. Lin, but we already used actually 25 minutes. I 23 minutes. We give more than allocated time. So I will be very happy to, if you would like to summarize, address 1 or 2 minutes, because we usually don't give more than 15 minutes for a presentation like this. We want to be fair with other presenters in the past.
Yeah, I can summarize what I was going to talk about.
Okay,
I was going to talk about what the difference was in the treatment that's being provided and how imperative it is to train clinicians in how to treat, how to diagnose and identify and treat parental alienation, and how the court is intricately involved in helping that treatment to take place. And the treatment that we've developed is 100% successful. So when I started working in this area, I was met with a lot of resistance, as people are resistant to change. But now I think the courts are so happy to hear of a solution to this issue that they're really willing to work along with me and other experts on the matter. So I think that kind of summarizes what I was going to say.
Thank you.
If I can just say one more sentence, and that's that I consider this problem very dire because there are a lot of suicides that take place and homicides. And in my practice alone, 3 children committed suicide before we could get them into the reunification therapy just last year. And there was a murder by a parent and a child that took place. You can watch it on 48 Hours. It's the Michelle Newrader case. And you can see all the alienating dynamics at play. It's a very moving piece. And the DA said that the reason that these kind of murders can take place is because the alienated parent is annihilated. And so the children and the ex don't have any feelings toward them when they murder them. It's a very interesting documentary. So I can abbreviate it all to that.
Thank you, Dr. Steinberg. Thank you so much. I apologize. I didn't know that there was a sequence of the presentation, so I missed that. I apologize. So thank you for being able to.
I got the main points in, and they got the rest.
Thank you for summarizing. I know that in the past that we made some suggestion, because usually the way we've done this with other efforts to introduce additional coursework, excuse me, is to have perhaps going through a legislative proposal, because it will come back to the BBS, and that's when the BBS has more, even in jurisdictions, and powers to discuss, and because they will, reach out to us to see what our position is about, and as we've done in the past. So every time we add a course, there is an extensive process, but definitely we are really thankful for your presentation and the educational part, because this is something that goes in the record that people are willing to watch over and over, because as you know, these meetings are recorded. So thank you again for coming here, for your efforts. And again, if there is anything else, I will move on to our next item in the agenda. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much. Okay, so I believe that concludes our item 6 in the agenda. We're moving on into item 6, which is an update of board sponsors and monitor legislations. I believe Rosanna is presenting to the updates, correct?
Yes. So for the legislative update, we just have a couple of bills to talk about. So the board is happy to announce that we have found authors for our bill proposals. And the supervision via video conferencing bill proposal the author has agreed to run that as urgency legislation. So that's really good news. We're in the process of having Leg Council draft that language. The author and the committee consultant at Business and Professions Committee did suggest a couple of amendments to the language of that bill. So we'll be bringing that back to the February 10th and 11th board meeting for a little bit further consideration, but I expect that bill to be introduced pretty soon now and start moving forward. So that's our supervision via video conferencing. We also have a author for the continuing education bill proposal, which has the 3-hour CE requirement for registrants in it, 3 hours for all applicants and current licensees to get training or coursework in telehealth, and then also some clarifications about pre-licensees in telehealth. So those will be moving forward. And then finally, we have submitted our omnibus bill proposal to the Senate Business and Professions Committee. And so that one will be introduced at some point. Usually the omnibus bill introduces a little bit later. I'm expecting to see that around March. And then just a couple of updates in the packet about a couple of 2-year bills that the board took positions on last year were kind of the legislative session just started January 1st. So we're waiting to see whether or not those bills are going to move or not this year. So we're tracking them. And that's all I have. And so that's the ledge update.
Thank you so much, Roseanne. Thank you. So much progress and so much work on all of this. So thank you for sharing with us. And so that concludes item 6. And we're moving to item 7 on the agenda, which is Christy will update us to the board rulemaking proposals.
I actually don't know if Christy is on. Christy had another presentation that she
okay.
MFT consortium to do at the same time. So I don't see her. So I'll go ahead and do the rulemaking.
This is the moderator. I found her in the attendee list, so now she's promoted up.
Okay.
Wonderful. Christy was found.
Yay, I'm here. I don't have too exciting of an update for you all. It's really just our continuing education and additional training requirements regulations. The notice was published in November. We did get some comments that will be discussed at the February 11th board meeting.
Mm-hmm.
The other two are regs we've sort of had in the wings. Our enforcement process regs, we're hoping to bring it to the Policy and Advocacy Committee in July. So we're working with the enforcement unit on that. And then this last one on exam waiting periods, professional corporations and accrediting agencies. I'm working on that right now, getting it ready for the initial review process, and I'm hopeful that we can get that one going very soon. So that's really it.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you. Always good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, that concludes item 7. We're moving now in agenda item 8, which is the public comments for items that are not on the agenda. Just as a reminder, the board may not discuss or take any actions on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether or not to place the matter on the agenda in future meetings. So perhaps now our moderator can open to the public to see if there are any public comment for items not in the agenda. I know there was someone at the beginning of the meeting that mentioned something. That could be the opportunity for them to speak now, or if they're still with us.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment for items not on the agenda, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And it looks like I do have a request for comment from Jennifer Alley. Jennifer, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Good morning, this is Jennifer Alley again with CAMPT. I would just like to bring an item maybe for future, suggest an item for a future agenda item, which was really hard for me to say today. And basically it's one we've been kind of chatting with board staff about, and it's about name changes. And so we have, people changing their names for life-changing events or transgender in the process of changing their name, and how they can adhere to the requirements in advertising and using their legal name, but also how can they approach using an AKA, for example, Jennifer Gabalis Alley, right? I use parentheses for a while, or Jennifer going to Joe, and how they can adhere, as I said, to the current requirements if they use their legal name on file, but also be recognized for what the life changes that are going on and be in compliance. So we just think it's an issue that's bubbled up a couple of times in our membership, and so it's one we think worthy of a thoughtful conversation by the board. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
This is the moderator. I have a request from individual identified as Maureen Tyra. Maureen, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I was really just wondering if it's possible to hear a summary of that supervision via video conference bill proposal. What is the intent there? I'm hoping that it would be allowed.
Can I ask to repeat the question? So I apologize. For some reason, my audio was missing. And Thank you.
Sure. You'd like me to repeat the question?
Yes, thank you. I apologize. I'm so sorry.
So under agenda item 6, item D, it says board supervision via video conference bill proposal. And my understanding is that there is someone who is going to sponsor that and write it for the whoever does that review. But I'm wondering if we can hear a summary. What is the proposal? Because I'm hoping that it's advocating for allowing video conference supervision.
This is just a public comment, so we don't really respond to this. We have information you could be able to find on our past board meeting, the suggested language, and it is in support of. So
fantastic. I'm sorry, it's in the passport.
We are in support of. We are moving forward with that.
So. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you for repeating the questions. Anyone else, moderator?
This is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. And I believe the next agenda item will be in regards to any suggestion for our board members for any future agenda items. If there are any members with any additional agenda items for future board meetings, or any from the public as well. So my fellow board member, any comments? Okay. And then moderator, again, if we can open to the public to see if there are any suggestions for future agenda items.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment for items for future agenda items, please click that Q&A icon or use the raise hand feature. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. And then back to the board. If there are no additional comments, I believe there are none. I see you all. The meeting is adjourned to February 10th and 11th, which is our board meeting. The time right now is 11:05 of January 21, 2022. Thank you so much for coming and for participating. We had a great audience today, so we encourage always people to come forward with their questions and comments. So we thank you all for your time, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.